Hello, my friends. My name is Tiffany Babb, and this is the Interesting Jobs podcast, where I talk to people with interesting jobs about their day-to-day, popular misconceptions about their field, and what they wish more people understood about their jobs. Today, our very special guest is Stephen Schabel, who works at the Center for Birds of Prey. We've also got a bird here. So, Stephen, what do you do?
So I am today the president and CEO of an organization called the Avian Conservation Center, also known as the Center for Birds of Prey. That's one of our operating divisions. But for the last 23 years, I have run the Center for Birds of Prey, which is the public arm of our organization. I work with birds, and we work with birds in a variety of contexts. Everything from running an avian medical facility where we treat injured birds, to utilizing birds of prey like this one that I have here with me now, to educate the public about what we do here in terms of our medical efforts and what those medical efforts are telling us about the world that we share with these really awesome animals, all the way down to managing a captive propagation program where we breed birds like this one as of a safeguard against losing species diversity in the wild, as well as a way to provide ourselves and other facilities like ours with birds like this one that we can utilize for education. I've been doing this for a long time. The owl's biting me right now. I started as an educator and have subsequently learned a lot about all of the operations here. And as of February this year, I took over the lead chair here at the center.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to unpack all that. But before we do, the bird that, for audio listeners, there has been a bird in and out of frame here. Can you tell me about her story?
Sure. So this is a species called an Asian brown wood owl. It's a bird. I'm going to see if I can get her to look up. She's biting her feet. There we go. It's a bird native to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Indonesia. It's one of what we call the wood owls. Here in North America, I'm in eastern North America in South Carolina. We have the barred owl, a very similar species to this. In the United States, we also have the northern spotted owl and the great gray owl. Those are the two other wood owl species that we have here. And as the name suggests, these are dense forest dwelling animals. They live in the woods, right? And as a consequence, one of the challenges they face is the loss of suitable habitat around the world. And so this is one of the species that we place a priority on in terms of conservation breeding them to, again, to be prepared to release them back into the wild when that becomes necessary. And in the meantime, maintaining a sort of I call it a genetic bank account, right? Genes in captivity that we can capitalize on in the future when we need to. This bird is being hand reared to be an educational ambassador. In the first few years of her life before she reaches breeding age, she'll be a bird that goes to schools and flies in flight demonstrations and does programs with our education team here at the center. And so she is hand reared. It might not be immediately obvious or apparent, but this is not how a wild owl would respond to these circumstances, right? Being inside a room. Right now, she's very curious about her own image on the screen here. This is a bird that has been raised by hand by our staff here at the center intentionally from day one to prepare her for a life as an educational ambassador. So she's much more comfortable around us than she would be if she were raised by her parents, if you will.
Do the birds have names?
That's a great question. We get it a lot. We made a conscious decision here at the center a long time ago that we weren't going to use names with the birds that we worked with on an educational basis. We didn't want to imply things about them that weren't true. And it's really easy to look at this very endearing little animal and think, oh, it's a cute, cuddly pet thing, right? Pets have names.
Right.
This is a wild animal that, yes, has some different behaviors because of the way that she was raised, but we really feel strongly that from an educational standpoint, we want people to leave our facility with information that is important and useful and valid. And unfortunately, I think in the zoo education world, from a broader standpoint, often the only thing we leave with is the name, right? If I were to tell you this is Fluffy the owl or something like that, you might only remember, oh, I saw Fluffy and it was an owl. You might not remember anything about the Asian brown wood owl in Southeast Asia and fragile habitat and working to conserve the diversity in the wild and all those things that we think are important messages for people to take away. So obviously we have more than one of a species. We need ways to identify them. We have some creative tools, some pretty practical tools. You can't really see it. Maybe I can zoom down. She has a band on her leg. Now she's curious about that, but she has a band on her leg that has an ID number that corresponds individually to her. That band went on her leg at a point that it would fit on there, and it will never come off. It's designed that way. So that number will stay with her throughout her existence, and that'll be how we recognize her from other individuals of this species.
That makes total sense. So tell me, what does your day-to-day life look like at work?
So day-to-day can be pretty varied, but if I were to be generally talking, and now perhaps my job as president is a little less interesting than my job would have been a few years ago, but we manage a huge collection of animals. And so a big part of our day-to-day work is taking care of those animals, right? We have to feed them and clean up after them and make sure that their space is as healthy as possible for them to live in, right? So there's everything from cutting up mice and rats to scrubbing bird poop off of perches and walls and things in the enclosure, all the way to some of the more fun and perhaps rewarding parts of the job, training these birds. I've spent a lot of the last 20 years training birds of prey for flight demonstrations. We do a free flight program here at the center where birds like this one fly right over people's heads. And the idea there is that we can catch the attention of our audience and then share some of the information that we might learn in our avian medical clinic. So that's a really fun part. For me, the most rewarding part of my day-to-day is that talking to people about this work, right? We feel pretty strongly that birds are really excellent indicators overall of the environment that we share with them. And if we pay attention to what the birds are telling us, if you will, we will do better by our own well-being in the future, right? We'll be able to head off environmental problems before they affect humans because birds, again, are this sort of bellwether, that idea of a canary in a coal mine. I really love talking to people about this work because I think it's really important. It started with this idea that we cause problems for birds. So the center, interestingly, we're in our 35th year now, and we started as a rehabilitation center, a medical facility for injured birds. We saw that birds like this, obviously not in South Carolina, not a brown wood owl, but birds like barred owls and bald eagles and red-tailed hawks were getting in trouble out there in the wild. They were getting hit by cars or shot or tangled in things, all problems that come from human activity. And so I think it's important for people to understand that, right? Just to share that information with someone and say, we're the problem. Obviously, we don't want to end there. We don't want to make somebody feel bad
Right.
and say, oh, you're the problem, that's it. But hey, we're the problem. Let's do something about it, right? And the only way we're going to do anything about it is if we understand that the problem exists, right? So starting there and having these conversations with people about birds and what they're telling us about the environment and how we can do better. Obviously, working with these super charismatic animals is a ton of fun, and allowing other people to come and have interactions with these amazing animals that they wouldn't normally have in the wild, it's a big deal, and it's exciting and it's great. But bigger picture wise, right, we're trying to help people understand, let's go deep. Let's go beyond this cool animal and talk about how the fact that its populations are declining might be related to my activities and might be ultimately related to my health in the future.
For a regular person, what's the best way that they can help the birds out?
That's a tough one because it can be lots of different things. I think when I get that question, one of the things I stress is that everyone just needs to be aware of the fact that all of our activities have impact, right? Sometimes the impact is positive impact, sometimes the impact is negative impact, but everything you do impacts the world around you, right? Whether it's driving a car or planting a certain vegetation in your yard or, being on the internet and using electricity that has to come from somewhere, and all of these things are connected, right? Most people, I think, in my experience is certainly true, want to maximize positive impact and minimize negative impact, right? Nobody likes to be the problem. Everybody likes to be a part of the solution to the problem. So understanding that and then taking that one step further and just being mindful of your activities, right? There are little things like we talk all the time about, don't litter the highway edge, right? If we throw apple cores and banana peels and trash out by the highway. We're going to attract mice and rodents to the highway, and then owls like this one or hawks or whatever. Maybe they're going to be more likely to hang out by the highway. So don't do that, right? Because we don't want them to get hit by cars, and that's an issue. And we certainly talk about a lot of little problems, or what could seem like little problems that have pretty easy solutions. We talk a lot right now. Our focus has been on rodenticide toxicity. So a lot of people don't think about that. That we all have rodents living around us, some more than others, and there are lots of ways to control them. And rat poison, bait stations, what we call the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, seem like a pretty convenient, easy way to get rid of rodents, right? You put out this trap, the rodent eats the poison, you don't see the rodent anymore. But what a lot of folks don't think about is that rodent walking out of that trap, having ingested this poison, not dead yet, moves out into the environment and gets eaten by this guy, right? And the toxin you intended for the rodent is now killing the owl. And we see that, unfortunately, in increasing numbers in our avian medical clinic every year. And so letting people know what these problems are, right? And again, for us, the cool part is we get to use these really charismatic animals to get your attention, to make it a little less painful to hear the fact that your activities are killing owls or bobcats or foxes or any of these other predators, right? If I just came to you and said, hey, Tiffany, if you use rat poison, you're killing owls, right? You're going to feel crummy. But if I said, hey, look at this cool owl, right? This is the animal that we're talking about here. We can talk about all the fun natural history of this species and all the things that are great about it. And who would want to cause problems for this animal, right? Who would want to create issues for this cool predator? And then we can talk about the problem and talk about the solutions. So it's hard to answer that. What is that one thing you can do, right, to be better for the birds, right? It's what are all the things you're doing collectively? What are their impacts on the world around you? And how can you take those impacts and do your best to minimize the negative ones and maximize the positive ones?
That's a really great message. So you mentioned the birds that are coming in with issues. How do these birds find you?
How do these birds find us? That's a great question. Most of them are found by folks in our community. The Avian Conservation Center is a nonprofit organization. We depend almost entirely on the folks around us to do the work that we do, right? So someone finds an injured animal in their yard, right? Finds a bird, and that bird doesn't do what it's supposed to do when you approach it, right? And we talk a lot about that birds should fly away from you if you approach it, right? They're afraid of you. They don't want to get eaten by you. So if they don't, well, maybe there's a problem. In most cases, what happens is a person in our community finds an injured animal, calls our number, and our dispatch line then works to get that bird transported to us. It's a process that involves volunteer staff from all around our region, and then they come to us, right? We don't have an ambulance that we send out 1,000 times a year to bring patients into our hospital, but we have a lot of ambulances throughout our community that help get those animals to us in a safe and time-efficient way so that they can then get treatment.
You mentioned earlier that you do training for the birds. What does the training look like?
I mean, this is training. I'm now training this owl that podcasts are okay, I guess. We focus on how can we showcase these birds' natural adaptations and natural behaviors and feature them in a predictable way. All right, so someone comes to visit us in our programs, they will see an owl fly right in front of their faces, right? I've been in the woods my entire life, and I've maybe seen 5 owls fly within 200 yards of me. Usually it's way down the trail, right? But I can predictably have an owl fly right over your head right now because I've trained it that it will do the thing it naturally does, right? What does an owl naturally do? It flies from point A to point B to point C in search of prey, right? And so we use positive reinforcement, reward the animal for doing what we want it to do, and we basically link those behaviors together into a natural series of behaviors, right? So I can remember when I was a kid, I saw a bird show at a zoo that had a macaw or some kind of bird riding a little bicycle, and it was like doing tricks. We don't train our birds to do tricks, right? We train our birds to do the things that they would naturally do, but we want to showcase them again for people that are here to visit. So that part's a little unnatural, right? They don't normally fly point A to point B right over a group of people, but again, through that positive reinforcement process, we can predictably capture those behaviors in a sort of more controlled circumstance. Obviously, there are risks. We do these demonstrations outside, and these birds are free to fly wherever they choose to fly. We have tools to ensure that we don't lose birds. They wear radio transmitters when they're flying so that if they decide they don't want to do the demonstration today, which is entirely within their Bill of Rights, if you will. They're welcome to fly where they choose to fly. Most of the time they choose to go where we've trained them to go, but you never know. We have to track them and ultimately retrieve them. We actually spent much of last weekend tracking a bird that took off during one of our programs. It happens. It's usually something strange in the environment. So we were doing a program for photographers, and there were a lot of cameras and a lot of big lenses, and this bird just got nervous and decided, I'm not comfortable here, I'm going to go somewhere else. And so we had to track her around our campus, and often it takes us off of our campus. I'm using that radio transmitter, and then ultimately find her and ask her to do what she's been trained to do. After about 8 hours, it happened. She did what she was trained to do, right? That's a part of, hopefully not our daily life, our daily part of our job, right? If they're flying off every day, we need to reevaluate the process a little bit and see where perhaps we might be missing a connection. The bird is preening right now, which is super fun to watch. I'm going to put the camera back on her.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's a really interesting interaction with these animals to get to experience all these things. It has challenges and risks and hard parts and fun parts, and we get to do it all.
What's the hardest part about your job?
In my current role as the president and CEO, the hardest part is that we don't have all the money in the world to do all the things that we want to do, right? That's hard. It means that it's a challenge on our staff who have to work long hours and take home paychecks that are smaller than they deserve. It means we can't have all of the facilities that we might need on an immediate basis, right? That's challenging. I think, and that's a tough question to really answer, because again, that's just the reality of life, right? No business has all of the money in the world to do everything that they could want to do right now. Well, maybe there's a few of them, but certainly not in the nonprofit world. So that's challenging. I think it's challenging when animals die. That's a part of our life as well, right? When you work with living things. I've been doing this for about 24 years, and some of these birds, this bird is only about 8 weeks old, so I've only known her for 8 weeks, but there are birds out there in our educational collection that I've known for 24 years. And they're my coworkers. They're animals that I work with all the time, and I know them very well. And they're all going to die just like we are, right? And that's hard. We have to be prepared to deal with it. And in our hospital, that's a big weight on our medical staff. In many cases, birds come into our hospital with injuries that we can't repair, right? Or you get hit by a car as a bird, the likelihood you're going to have some pretty catastrophic injuries is high. And in many cases, humane euthanasia is the only thing we can do for these animals to help them, if you will. And that's hard on a day-to-day basis. But understanding, again, those are realities of life. Those are things that we all will deal with ultimately. Dealing with the finite nature of life in many ways can be challenging. I think probably one of the reasons it's so hard for me to think about what's the hardest part of this job is that there are a lot of parts of this job that are just really rewarding and easy and great. And I don't think about the hard parts that often, perhaps.
How did you get into this line of work?
A series of horrible mistakes. No, sort of, right? We're located just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and I grew up here in the low country of South Carolina. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I went to college, studied pre-med, got to second semester organic chemistry, and realized that being a doctor wasn't in my future. Started looking around, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and ended up getting a degree in education. Teaching is a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis, and something I feel pretty strongly about. But also realized pretty quickly doing my student teaching that I wasn't really cut out for being a classroom teacher. I have a great deal of respect for classroom teachers of all ages. It's a very difficult job that's underappreciated. It wasn't for me. So sort of explored a variety of things and ended up in graduate school looking at environmental communications issues. So I have a master's degree in environmental policy. And what I realized was that I could combine my scientific passion, right? I love nature, I love science. Perhaps I wasn't good enough at organic chemistry to take it to the medical doctor level, but I certainly have a good grasp of scientific principles. And then add that to my educational background. I love talking to people and teaching people about things. So teaching people about environmental issues and how they affect their lives, right? Helping normal people understand the science that may sound like foreign language and how that science is directly applicable to their life was what I studied. And then after graduate school, I had the opportunity to come here to the center to work. Never thought I was going to be working with birds in captivity. That zookeeper element of my job, that was never a dream of mine. I wouldn't ever go back and say, yeah, I went to the zoo one time and said, that's what I'm going to do. I certainly find it very rewarding. It's very interesting working with these animals, but really the people connection is where my passion lies. That was 23 years ago, and now here I am running the organization, which is very exciting and has its own new set of challenges.
What do you wish that people knew about your work that you think they might have misconceptions about or that they just wouldn't know?
Yeah, so I think from our particular organization standpoint, a lot of people come and see our educational program and they think that's it, right? And it very easily gets to be the thing that they notice, right? They come and they say, oh, wow, there's these people there and they have these birds that are trained and they fly right over our heads and they teach us a little bit about birds. And really, that's only just a tiny piece of what we do here. Often it's the piece that gets people interested, like kids especially. I find that kids come to our programs and they see our educators out there with these trained birds and it's like, wow, I want to do that. I see these people with birds landing on their glove and man, that's awesome. Sure, there's no question about that. It's awesome and it's part of it, but really it's so much bigger than that, right? It's these birds as a platform for understanding our world, right? Brown wood owl on its own, pretty cool, pretty amazing, right? Hearing better than just about any animal on the planet, catching prey under leaf litter in the dense forests of Southeast Asia, that's awesome, right? But birds and population decline and how that impacts human life and other animal life, that's the big story, right? And so understanding that there are all these different elements. Every year we get 1,000 points of insight into what's happening with birds here in the low country of South Carolina. Those are the patients that come into our hospital, right? And maybe we see lead poisoning, or maybe we see rodenticide poisoning, or unfortunately we still see a lot of these birds coming in having been shot, right? And so these are all little pieces of information that then we have the opportunity to share with these cool birds in this program. And you put all of that together and it gives us a unique window into the world all around us. And that's, I think, the thing that many people miss, right? Many people just see it and they say, oh, wow, cool bird show, right? And we don't call it a bird show. We call it an educational demonstration because, yeah, it's to showcase this animal, but it's really a lot deeper than that. It's really, what can we take from this? What can we learn from paying attention to birds just in our day-to-day life that might help us to better understand the world?
It's all about the big picture. If someone were interested in going into your line of work, what would you recommend they do?
I think that the first step is to get involved, right? I tell kids, we get that question a lot from parents that are there with their kids, or in a lot of cases, maybe a grandparent that comes and visits with their kid. And they say, well, little Johnny's going to go home and be really excited about birds. What should he do? Well, pay attention to birds, right? Learn the birds in your backyard, learn the birds in the book that you have access to, but more importantly, get out there and experience the ones that you can see. They're everywhere you go. You're not going to be in a place unless you're in a really crazy place like the coldest depths of Antarctica or the highest tips of a mountain somewhere. You're going to look around and see a bird. Pay attention to it. Learn its behaviors. Pay attention to the stuff you have access to, right? And then, obviously books are a great place and finding other resources. I really think it's important for people that think that perhaps wildlife education or environmental education, working with animals is maybe a potential future for them to get involved with an organization. We're a largely volunteer-run organization. We have volunteer staff that come from all walks of life, all ages, young people, older people. So get involved, right? You may have come to the program or gone to the zoo rather or anything and seen the animal and thought, man, that's a cool job. But really, that's only a tiny fraction of that person's everyday job, right? There's a lot more to it. Some of it equally cool and some of it kind of mundane and a little gross sometimes, right? We have to cut up rats and mice. So get involved and see, is this really what I want to do? Right? We have interns that come and work with us for longer periods of time that are college students that are interested in getting a foot in the door or maybe interested just in figuring out, I know I want to work with birds somehow, but I'm not sure exactly how. And so getting involved is a great way to do that. And it's how most organizations like ours stay alive, right? We can't do it with paid labor. We can't do it all with paid labor. So volunteering and interning are often great ways to get that experience. I tell people a lot of times too that, if you're trying to figure it out, what is it that I want to do? It's just as important, maybe even more important, to figure out what it is I don't want to do, right? And you're not going to know that until you're doing it. And you're saying, you know what, I saw the cool parts and I thought that was going to be all of it. And then I realized there were these other parts and I don't want to do those other parts. It's like, in my personal experience with education, there are lots of parts I love about it, but that classroom element and all the things that go along with that just wasn't for me. And so I had to look for those other avenues.
Do you have a favorite type of bird to work with?
I think they're all great in lots of ways. I would say, I should cover the owl's ears. Owls are perhaps not my top of my list, only because, and this may not be intuitive to people that don't train animals, but in order to train an animal, whether it's a human animal or a bird animal, you have to get in that animal's head, right? You have to understand, what is this animal about to do and really likely to do, and what does it want in return for doing that will make it want to do that over and over and over again, right? That's all positive reinforcement training is. And for me, for whatever reason, getting in the head of an owl is really challenging. I think owls are really awesome, right? Don't get me wrong. I think they're super cool animals, but from a training standpoint, they're hard for me. I like the physical aspect of training falcons. Falcons are high-speed diving predatory birds, and we train them to what's called a lure. We swing around something that looks like a bird, and the falcon chases it. And so that has kind of a physical element, almost like playing a racket sport, like playing tennis or pickleball or whatever, right? You got to use your body in the training, so that's got a little element in it that's kind of fun. Kites are probably my favorite group of birds just in general. They're one that are really fun to teach about because a lot of folks aren't even aware that they exist, right? I ask groups all the time, who knows that there's a bird called a kite? And arguably 20% of people in general have no idea that group of birds exists. And they're amazing to watch in flight. And we actually have an endangered species of kite in South Carolina, so they have a lot of elements to them that make them fun. In general, I think birds are amazing to watch, right? What my favorite bird to watch is whatever bird I'm watching right now. I feel pretty strongly that they all have cool things about them that if you just take time to look, you'll see it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm fascinated by watching this owl. I feel like I'm learning so much just through watching,
right?
Which
I mean,
is
and
really amazing.
The opportunity to do that is something that we don't take lightly. What's in front of me here is something that most people, the extreme majority of people, will never encounter something like this. And if they do, there's usually a problem, right? There's usually something wrong. That bird fell out of its nest or something's not right if you're encountering this. But to have the opportunity in a sort of controlled way to pay attention to this young animal, and it may not be something that all of our guests always have access to, right? Our guests that are here today at the center will get to meet this bird and see it right up close, but I get to follow it from the time it's an egg all the way through its development to when it's cruising around doing flight demonstrations to ultimately, hopefully, breeding in a breeding program. And so I get to see all those changes in real time. And then for me, that job becomes, how do I share that information with other people, right? We can do it in a format like this, which is pretty fun, right? Hopefully listeners and viewers will take cool things from this and use it to do better. It may just be have to talk about that process, but we get that intimate exposure to these animals through all their life cycle stages that we wouldn't have, just paying attention to them in the wild, which is, I think from a educator standpoint, it's the most powerful teaching tool in the world. A living animal that connects you to that landscape, to that habitat that they require, to the prey that they're eating. It connects you to all those things and then bring it back around to how does what I do affect all of those things.
Now, here's my last big job question. What's your favorite part of your job?
I think I mentioned it already, but my favorite part of my job is talking to people about birds. I think there's no question about it. That's one of the reasons that I was excited to make the move from my former position to the one that I'm in now. I may not get to scrub poop off of the walls and cut up mice and rats to feed these birds, and I certainly do a lot less day-to-day hands-on training with birds than I have at other parts of my career, but I get to talk to people about these amazing animals, right? And it may be talking to a potential donor about how their contribution to our work can help us to further our mission. It may be talking to a student about, anatomy of an owl and how that makes their lifestyle possible. I think it's a really amazing tool, and I wish more scientists took the time to get good at it, right? Whether if you're a researcher sharing the information that you discover in your study, right? If you're a bird watcher sharing the birds that you saw at your bird feeder with somebody else, getting the next person excited about, engaged in the content that you know a lot about, right? That's what I like doing, to get people to where they're ready to start taking those next steps and asking the next questions, and they're paying attention and they're ready to share that information with the next person that comes down the line.
Stephen, this has been so fascinating. Where can people find your work online and support the center?
Excellent. Yes. So we have a website. It's www.thecenterforbirdsofprey.org. We have we're on all the social media channels as well. We're on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all of this. Most of those will be under like SC Birds of Prey, I think, or just if you search Center for Birds of Prey, you ought to find us on those. We would also encourage anybody that's ever in the Charleston area to come and visit us. And you can learn more about all of that on our website. But I think the best way to learn more about what we do here and to support what we do almost always starts with a visit to the center. Come and see us, come and see our programs, come and meet birds like this one. Take that next step.
I definitely want to go now if I'm ever in the area.
Absolutely.
I'd love to.
Come and be my guest.
Thank you. And that's it this week on the Interesting Jobs podcast, where we chat with people with interesting jobs. If you have an interesting job or know someone with one, email us and let us know. We might even be able to chat.